I am so excited about our guest.
I am too. So Jeff Goodman, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Richard and Elizabeth. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so tell us about what you've been up to. You're rediscovering New York, and that sounds like a fantastic idea, especially in the age of COVID. We're all just dying to know what has changed. So please tell us a little bit about your tours and your business and your radio show.
Well, since we're talking about entrepreneurs, actually my tour program and my radio show is our event and content businesses that support my real estate business. About 9 or 10 years ago, I thought it would be a great idea. I don't know why anyone else didn't think about this before, but for a real estate agent to host a series of neighborhood walking tours and to connect people with the great things about New York neighborhoods. I have a background in advertising and marketing, and I met a tour guide and I came up with this idea to do it for a real estate agent. It's kind of like Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. I'm not a tour guide, and the insurance salespeople weren't naturalists. They hired Marlon and Jim to do that. I do the same on my tours. I have a tour guide. And I expanded it to a radio show, weekly radio show, about 2.5 years ago. Since COVID, we actually don't do the physical tours, but I do a series of virtual tours and online content, although I'm very much looking forward to the day when we can all congregate again. There's one other element to the walking tours, Richard, which is that, in most tours, you just go and do the tour and then you leave. Being a networker and a connector, I came up with the idea to keep the party going. So after the tour ends, I find a local watering hole or bar. I have some commercial sponsors who pay for food. And most of the people who come on the tour end up coming to the bar or the restaurant. They get off their feet, they have a snack. But what they do is they end up socializing and they end up networking. And I, as the person who set it all up in the world of networking, I'm the one who's remembered as not just having provided this great content, but facilitating these relationships that people create or they enhance when they see people that they already know.
So Jeff, I interviewed Jeff for my startup fireside I'll talk about later. And I was so impressed. I wanted him on the show as a guest. I just think this is so out of the box thinking. This is so creative. I don't know any other real estate agent that does anything like this. So
I'm going to start a walking tour of trademarks in New York City. I'm just kidding. But I think that would be.
Well, you better not. You better not use my brand
right
name
here on the air, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
But
Well, I'm not an intellectual property lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but you can't copyright an idea, but you can a mark. I have my own mark, but sure, it's a great idea.
I'll make sure you get credit. Don't But here we're walking down Fifth Avenue, pointing to all the trademarks. I'm sure that'll be a big seller in the tourism world. So
are you sure about that? You want to do that? I'm just kidding. No, we know he's joking.
Well, he doesn't do it himself, so I was hoping maybe you would
there.
do it.
So when Jeff and I spoke, so Jeff invites people that he likes. I mean, it's open to everybody, but he invites you, he gets to know you. So it's not like you're walking on this tour and you don't know the person heading it, but he has another person actually doing the tour, but he's at the other end. So they kind of sandwich you, right, Jeff?
Yeah, exactly. The Joyce Gold, my tour guide, the partner I work with, the attention is always on Joyce, which is good because number one, I get between 60 and 100 people on these tours. So we have speaking devices that go through Bluetooth. And I'm always positioning myself with the crowd so people can hear the speaker. But also because I have a tour guide, it gives me a chance, even though very perfunctorily on the tour, because everyone's paying attention to the tour guide, is to talk to people. Hey, good to see you. What did you think of that? This is cool. I didn't know that, and to engage people with me as the person who set this up and brought everyone together. But the real opportunity to connect with people comes at the reception afterward, because then, there's not someone on stage. It's just people having a drink, having a snack, and schmoozing.
That sounds like so much fun. We are definitely doing it.
I'm down for that.
Yeah, as soon as you can get us back in. And you're doing it virtually now though, right?
Yes. Two things. One, being a connector and networker, one of the things that I do on my at these receptions is if there are people whom I think that have some synergy with each other business-wise, I make sure I introduce them, because then of course they get a benefit and I get a benefit. I am doing them virtually now, and one of the differences on my virtual events compared to other people, if you go on most virtual events right now, you notice that they're in the webinar format. You only see the presenters and you can't see who's participating. Because my tours have come to be a social thing and a place where people who know each other get to interact. My virtual events are actually in a meeting format, and I say at the beginning of them, I have them in the meeting format so people can see who else is part of the virtual event, and I invite people to send each other private chat messages. So as much as I possibly can with the virtual event, I try to keep that community and that connection aspect between people going.
So Jeff, real quick question. Do you just focus on one neighborhood per tour, or do you go through several different neighborhoods? New York's a big city, right?
That's a great question. Most of the tours are specific to one neighborhood, Richard, because there's so much history, and New York is great for history. We go back 400, well, there were people living here for thousands of years, but what we know as a town started 400 years ago, which is pretty old for an American city. So there's usually enough interesting history, enough architecture, enough fun stories about who lived there and what people did, and maybe some seedy stories, but just to keep people's interest up. Once in a while, I will have a tour that encompasses a couple of neighborhoods, but that's because they're really connected. Like, for example, we'll do the Irish Five Points and also Little Italy. Or when we did the tour of Gowanus, we included part of Carroll Gardens because the development of those neighborhoods was so closely intertwined. It just made sense to put them together.
Okay, Jeff, I want to give Kenya a chance to ask a question, but first I just gotta know. I know Richard wants to ask this too. Tell us a seedy story.
How did you know I was going to ask you that? Oh,
Tell us
my
a
gosh.
seedy story.
Well, the seedy story, the best one is the crime of the century. I think it was 1907 or 8. Stanford White, the famous architect who built Madison Square Garden, the second iteration of it, catty corner across Madison Square Garden. He was having an affair with some other rich guy's wife or girlfriend, Emily Nesbitt. So on the outdoor restaurant at the top of the garden, I forgot his name, he pulls out a gun and he kills Stanford White in front of a huge room of people. Because he is politically connected, though, instead of being convicted of murder, his mother is able to pull strings and probably pay some bribes and have him sent to a hospital for the criminally insane instead of facing the music for having committed a crime.
That sounds.
I don't know that it gets much more seedy than adultery and murder and getting off the hook with some money behind you.
No, it sounds like a lot like a Law and Order episode.
So, you need to go to Kenya for a comment. I got to hear what Kenya has to say.
Yeah, no, so what a wonderful platform that you've built. I'm just curious, because I have not gotten a chance to listen to your radio show, so I apologize for that. What does it sound like audibly? Because I can envision what it would be like to do the tour and do it virtually and in person, but you said you've transferred this into radio content. So I'm just curious, like, what your show sounds like and how you're capturing those moments via audio.
Kenya, that's a great question. The content and the general subject matter is the same, but since the medium is different, the format changes. On the walking tours, there's one tour guide who you can see. She's part of the crowd. She's almost like being on stage. On the radio show, when I cover neighborhoods, it's an interview show. I don't do most of the talking, even though I like to hear myself talk. I generally have two guests. The first guest is the historian who talks about the history of the neighborhood. And then in the second part, I have a business owner, an artist, someone who works with a nonprofit, who's part of the community, who can talk more recently about how the neighborhood has evolved, what they like about the neighborhood, how the neighborhood is special, maybe talk about some businesses that they wish were there. It's a general, the program is a general way to have people get the sense of a neighborhood, but also the current vibe of it. The walking tour is, in that sense, is a little bit more historical, even though you're on the street and you see who's there, but you don't get to talk to people who live there now. You just get the history.
That sounds great. I mean, that just sounds like a and how can people find the radio program?
That's a great question. I'm on every night, on every Tuesday night at 7:00 on talkradio.nyc, the Talking Alternative Network. And it's also podcasted on Amazon, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, and other services. The program is called Rediscovering New York, which, Richard, by the way, is a registered mark.
I saw that. I saw the little R. I was going to hit you up for a trademark, but I decided against it.
Actually, my intellectual property attorney suggested that I do the mark in 3 categories: for the radio show and podcast, for walking tours, as well as for bus tours, which I've done too. So it's in 3 separate areas. So anyone
Sounds
thinking
like you
about
got
taking
some
it from me,
great
got some-
advice.
yes.
Do you ever do, I mean, is it really for mostly local New Yorkers, or do you, I mean, there's a big tourism industry, right? It would seem you could draw from a lot of different sources, or do you like to keep it smaller and private?
That's another great question. The walking tours are by invitation only. It's people whom I know and people they know. I have a mailing list of 4,000 people. So anyone who's either connected to me or who's connected to someone who gets an invite is welcome to come. And that's mostly people who are New Yorkers, who are in New Yorkers. Once in a while, someone will bring a relative from the Philippines or a friend from Australia on the trip. The radio show and podcast, though, is different. I don't have a personal relationship with most of the listeners. I have thousands of listeners. And we can tell because on internet radio, you can monitor where people are listening because of their IP addresses. So there are a lot of New Yorkers, there are people from other parts of the country, and there are people from other parts of the world. And it's great to see people listening from Seoul, from Marrakesh, from all over the world. It's mostly the radio show, I think, largely is people who are not in New York, who like to live vicariously, right, about New York. But the walking tour, you have to be here, and it's mostly people who are here. And I don't sell tickets; I give it away, so I don't advertise it to the public.
Great.
Well, we get to go.
But I will say that it is. I'm not in the tour guide business, and I'm not in the radio show business. What I do with it, is by having this other programming, I really provide value and show people that I am not only passionate about New York and its neighborhoods, but I have my finger on the pulse of what neighborhoods are like. And that's how I use that in my business to enhance my value to people who may be considering doing business with me.
So Jeff, we are almost out of time. I have to ask you this question quickly. How did you come up with such a creative idea?
Oh, Elizabeth, I was at a networking event, and it was musical chairs. And, where you move around and you get 2.5 minutes to tell the person sitting across from you what you do. And this woman sat across from me. Her name is Joyce Gold. And she told me that she not only does tours for the public, but does them for banks and for birthday parties. And I like to say I went home and woke up in the middle of the night with this light bulb, but it was more like a couple of days or weeks. And I thought, this would be a great idea for a real estate agent to bring neighborhoods to life through an event and to have FaceTime with people. And so that was what it engendered. I also have a marketing and advertising background. So as a real estate agent, it gives me my background. I spent 22 years in advertising and media. It gives me a little bit of an advantage at being able to come up with out of the box ideas. But as a friend of mine who was a chief ad columnist for an important newspaper told me when I won an award and he congratulated me, and I said, this is a knockoff of Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. It's the same thing. And he looked across the table and he said, Jeff, he said, the number of new ideas that have come up, you can count on both hands over 2,000 years. Almost everything is an innovation of somebody else's idea.
Thanks, Jeff. How can people find you?
People can find out about my real estate business on my own website. I have my own URL, and I don't think I had to copyright it, Richard. It's www.jeffgoodman.nyc. And Jeff Goodman NYC is also the handle for all my social media channels.
Well, that's great. Thanks so much for joining us. And you're listening to Passage to Profit with Jeff Goodman, and hosted by Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart. We'll be right back after this interesting commercial message.